Hi, this is Kim Newlove, host of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Welcome to the fourth and final part of my Pharmacist Mom series. Each Friday in May 2022, I've been publishing an interview with a pharmacist mom in honor of Mother's Day, which was Sunday, May 8th. If you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. Again, my name is Kim Newlove, and I'm the host. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I made a career transition to voice actor and podcast host. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for women pharmacist authors, provide medical narration to clients in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, and narrate content for explainer videos and e-learning projects. I was inspired by my nonverbal son who has autism to combine my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice and launch my business, The Pharmacist Voice, in 2017. My son Craig helped me realize the power of having a voice and using it. My solo podcast episodes are about some aspect of being a pharmacist, a voice actor, a pharmacist podcaster, or my career transition from pharmacist to voice actor and podcast host. My interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. This is episode 152, and you can find the show notes with links to most of what's mentioned today on my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Just click on the podcast tab and search for episode 152. Today's episode is an interview with Janet Titkemeier. She's my aunt. I'm going to take just a quick little side trip before I read her bio. Now, there are 6 pharmacists in my family. 6. Yes, you heard me right. There are 3 women and 3 men. Here's just a little background and how this relates to my Aunt Janet. All right. Janet married Tom. Tom is my dad's brother. My dad also has another brother who is a pharmacist, and his name is Al. All right. Al had a daughter named Sarah. He still has. She's alive and well. Has a daughter named Sarah, who's also a pharmacist. My dad, who is not a pharmacist, has 2 children who are pharmacists. That would be my brother Andy and me. So there are 3 of my generation, basically, and 3 of my Aunt Janet's generation. It's been a blast. Family dinners, talking shop at the table while everybody else rolls their eyes. That was how I grew up, and it was a blast. Going to the same pharmacy school as my Aunt Janet, Uncle Tom, and Uncle Al was amazing. I don't know if anybody else in the world has that experience. Going to the same pharmacy school that your aunt and 2 uncles went to. Everybody knows your name. It's like Cheers. You know that TV show? Anyways, when I went to pharmacy school, I already had the right last name. And part of it was because of Uncle Tom and Uncle Al, who were Titkemeiers, and then Janet took their name, and there was nothing like it to have that precedent. It was pretty special. Let me tell you just a little bit more about Aunt Janet, then we'll dive right into our interview. Janet Titkemeier earned her Bachelor of Science degree in pharmacy from the University of Toledo College of Pharmacy in 1976. She retired from clinical pharmacy practice in 2018 and lives in Toledo, Ohio with her husband Tom, also a retired pharmacist. Janet maintains an active Ohio pharmacist license and volunteers as a medical missionary. She enjoys bicycling, traveling, and spending time with family. Without further ado, here's my conversation with my Aunt Janet Titkemeier. Hi, Aunt Janet. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Hello.
Hey, happy belated Mother's Day. How was your Mother's Day?
You as well. It was great. I was in Arizona with Drew and Lindsay and met our new little grandson. So it was enjoyable. It was very nice.
A different kind of a Mother's Day, right?
It was, and I learned something there. My family sent me flowers, and it's so dry there that they dried out in like 2 days. And I have dried flowers for floral arrangements and have never been able to attain that kind of drying. So
that is funny.
Dry there.
Yeah, I know. Ohio is way different from Arizona.
Yeah. So, but it was enjoyable. It was nice.
I'm glad to hear you had a good Mother's Day. That's great. Mine was good
Thanks.
too. Hung out with family,
Good.
didn't have to work. That's the best.
That's great. That's the best part.
Yes. Yes. Well, I've brought you on the podcast to share how you used your voice as a pharmacist. I know you're retired now, and how you used your voice as a mom and currently as a mom of grown up kids and grandkids. So, this is going to cover the spectrum today. Well, let's start with how you've used your voice as a pharmacist. How did you get into pharmacy?
To be honest with you, I wanted to go to veterinary school. And that was my first love. And parents basically said, we can help you with college expenses if you stay home. Because I had 3 other siblings and they were putting 4 kids through college, and we all had gone to private high schools. And so there was a real value for education in my family. And college was always on the menu. That's where we were going. So, but we didn't have the resources that a lot of families had. So there were sacrifices that were made. And when it came time to go to college, they basically said, well, we can help you, but, we'll pay tuition, but everything else is on you. So we really feel that you need to stay home if you want the best bang for your buck. So that's what I did. And I decided then, well, I guess I have to look at something else. And I looked into the sciences, and that was about the only thing that really sparked my interest. So that's how I ended up in pharmacy school. And I chose UT because I was a commuter. I lived at home, commuted, and I worked through college. So I was able to pay for my expenses. So that's how that all happened.
I have never asked you this question, so I didn't know all that. I didn't know you wanted to go to veterinary school at first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I'm glad we're having this conversation, and then we get the truth comes out, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Well, now I understand why you chose UT then.
Yes. And, pharmacy was a second choice, but it was a good choice. So, and UT was convenient. And, we had a pharmacy school right here in town, so there's no reason to go away. So.
Hey, it's a pretty good pharmacy school. I went through it too. And I don't know if you know this, but because I had the right last name, so to speak, I had some of your college professors, and I think they knew that us Titkemeiers came from good stock. Although you were not a Titkemeier when you started pharmacy school, right?
Right. But there were, Tom and Alan ahead of you. So, yeah, it's good to have some connections, I guess, sometimes. So I had a cousin that had the same last name as me, and he was a year ahead of me. So I don't know if it helped or hurt, but he was a good student. So.
All right. Now tell me, how did you spend your career? I know most of this, but I bet there's something I didn't know. So how did you spend your pharmacy career?
I had done all of my internship in retail, and I worked for a small family pharmacy that's still in existence today, which is kind of rare. And they've kind of branched off into other things other than just the pharmacy counter, but they're into medical and health appliances and that type of thing. I really felt that I wanted to experience, my goal was to do retail, hospital, and sales because I had relatives that were in all 3. I never made it to the sales part, but as a pharmacist, you're kind of a salesman anyway, in certain ways. But anyway, I decided I wanted to try hospitals. So my first job out of college, I took at Magruder Hospital in Port Clinton, Ohio, and it was a 1 pharmacist operation. I knew nothing about hospital pharmacy. I just dove in head first. I had a great mentor there, and she really helped me a lot. She worked 1 afternoon a week So I had a half day on Wednesday. So she helped train me, and I relied a lot on friends that were in hospital pharmacy, and it was totally different, but I learned, and it was pretty primitive in those days how hospital pharmacies ran. They ran a lot like retail, but on a more global level in the hospital. So I worked there for about a year, and I got an opportunity to come to back to Toledo, and there was an opening at St. Vincent. And at the time, the director of pharmacy there, when I interviewed with him, he had worked part-time for Ryan Pharmacy, where I had done my internship, and he knew my boss. And he said, well, if you made it through working at Ryan Pharmacy for Jerry Ryan, you got to be good. So anyway, he hired me on the spot. It was 41 years I spent there. And I did a lot of different things. I wore a lot of different hats. I started out basically in the main pharmacy. And over the years, we decentralized and we had pharmacists out on nursing units. And so I had the opportunity. I worked peds, neonatal, labor and delivery for a while. That involved doing pediatric chemo. And a lot of our pediatric chemo was investigational out of the University of Michigan. So it was kind of a new horizon in children's chemotherapy. I worked on an ortho floor, general medicine floor. I worked in the ICU. And so because I was versatile, I was able to float a lot. And I was working part-time after I started having a family. And so the beauty of that was that people would call me and say, hey, I want to take my kids to Cedar Point on Friday. Could you cover my slot? Could you work for me? And because I was able to work the area that they were pretty much assigned to, I had the flexibility of saying, sure, I can do that, So I worked in all those areas. We had ICU satellite pharmacists as well. So I did that for many years. And when my kids school, I felt that I needed to work full-time to help pay their tuition. And so I took a full-time position working midnights. The midnight pharmacist, it was a pharmacist and 2 technicians. And I did that for 8 years. I worked 4 10s. So they, you only work 4 days a week, but they were 10 hours and nights. And eventually, after 8 years, I had an opportunity to move to a day shift, which was more advantageous to my health, I think. Nights is definitely for young people. And I was in my 50s when I was doing that. So anyway, I moved to days and I worked, I was back in peds again for quite some time and floating around. And then I finally my boss asked me to own the OR satellite for the open heart and vascular area of the hospital. So we had 2 surgical satellites, and I worked in the open heart and vascular for about the last, I'd say, 10 years of my career. So that was a good experience, but I wore a lot of different hats over the years. So
yes, you have.
And that's where I ended up. That's where I finished out, was in the OR. So
I remember you worked quite a bit of outpatient as well.
I would go down there and float because they had, I had the retail experience, so I could go there and, function.
No, it's good to be able to fill gaps.
Well, it was really the flexibility. Being flexible was what really helped me to get the hours that I needed and wanted. And at one point, I was considered like supplemental. And because I had picked up so many hours helping people out or filling in gaps, that I got a letter one day and they said, well, congratulations, you're now part-time, because by law, I had been working part-time for a year. And so they had to classify me as part-time employee. So it had its benefits. So anyway, that's how that happened.
For context, when did you graduate from pharmacy school and when did you retire?
I graduated in 1976, and I retired in 2018. So this is, 2018 is already going to my fourth year. So
Yeah, time flies, right?
when you're having fun, yeah.
Yeah, being retired, I'm sure, is much more fun than the grind of working.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun working though. There's a lot of good times.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes. And over the years, you got to influence all kinds of interns and students and new pharmacists. What was that like for you?
Well, I think it was a really good experience in that students taught us a lot about what was, the new trends and what they were being taught. But we had the opportunity as pharmacists to teach them, how you behave in the workplace. It was sort of on the job training for them so that when they graduated, they were ready to go. And we just, they tagged along with us. And then eventually, when they got the hang of it, they were just like a pharmacist alongside us. So it was extra set of hands, an extra brain. And it's always good to bounce ideas off of each other, especially when you're discussing drug therapy and dosing and that type of thing. And opinions are good. And so it was a mutual thing. I think, we were symbiotic. We worked off of each other. So it was a joy because it's always nice to have youth and young people around you. And so we learned a lot from them.
That's a great opportunity. I know with young people, you learn from one another.
Yes. And the technology too, they were very helpful. I think some people embrace technology, and I always felt that you really need to embrace the technology in the workplace and accept change, because you will be a much happier camper if you accept change. And there are people that dig their heels in and resist. But I can tell you this, it doesn't fly with management either. You're going to come on board or the bus is leaving. So the more you accept change, the happier employee you're going to be. So
that's good advice.
Mm-hmm.
As far as getting hired, what I heard you say is that basically you knew a guy and that's how you got the job. I
knew somebody. Well, I knew that there was an opening through somebody I knew. And when I interviewed for the job, he knew my former employer. And I think he knew that he was a good person. He had a lot of credibility in the community and respect. And so he really was the type of person that trained you well and had high expectations. And so anybody that, graduated from doing an internship there was ready to go and, worthy of being hired. So he grabbed me, and I was really grateful. I had an opportunity to speak to him a few years ago. I think he just had his 90th birthday, and his daughter-in-law brought him down to the hospital and, took him for a tour. And he said a lot of very nice things. Really nice guy. So he just passed this last year, but he gave me an opportunity that I was really grateful for. So
that was a really nice story. And it just goes to show that networking back then and now, it still counts. It helps to know people.
Yes. And sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes. Even today, how would you say that getting a job has changed over the years? You must have seen some changes.
Well, it was interesting. I think especially like with our technical staff, I realized towards the end that if they wanted to quit, they just text the boss, I quit, or just not show up for work. So the technology has changed a lot of that. I think as far as hiring goes, there's all these avenues where you can go to LinkedIn. There's other ones I know that my kids have used when they were looking for jobs. It's all, online now, and you can search and you can look at evaluations of potential companies that you want to work for. I think Glassdoor is one where you can look at all the gripes that people have and complaints, or you can look at the compliments and say this is a great place to work. So I think people have a lot more opportunity in that they can filter out potential bad choices. Back in the day, if you took a job, you might find out later that you didn't like that place and you're kind of stuck. But now you can research it a little bit before you even apply. And the application process is all online. You can upload all your documentation, and it's a lot easier. Back in the day, you had to, send a letter, a cover letter, resume, and put it in the mail and just pray and hope that you got an answer. One thing I don't like about the hiring process that goes on now, and I experienced it with a gentleman that I suggested come for an interview, and he came, asked for a tour. I took him around the hospital. He went and visited our clinical director, applied for a position, and then they don't hear anything. And I think it's a great disservice that employers do not respond to potential hires. And I know you probably get tons of applicants, but a simple, thank you for your application. We've found a better candidate. That's all you have to say. But by leaving people hanging, I think it's a disservice to people that are seriously looking for a job. So
I noticed that over the years, competition is a little bit more fierce. The number of applicants per position has increased. Would you say that you've seen that as well?
Oh, yes. And the students that we had that did rotations and residencies, the more credentials you have, obviously, they probably take precedence over others. But sometimes I think the credentials don't always say a lot about what kind of a worker you are, because the bottom line at the end, you're in the trenches and there's work that has to be done. And I guess I really felt that there's a lot of embellishment that goes on in resumes. There's people that specialize in editing and embellishing for you. And you can make somebody look really, really good that may not be a good candidate. But, and that's got to be difficult for employers that are hiring to be able to differentiate who is really the person they want, so.
Yeah, it's more than what you see on the paper. You've got to be a good human too.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing what you've seen over the years. I definitely can tell that the type of interview you had is probably a little more simple than what they do now. And for better or for worse, that's just how it is.
Right. Back then it was a handshake, you're hired, Now it's different.
I know. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast before, but the way that I got my job at Walgreens, working midnights as a young person, like you proposed, that's the best time to do it when you're young. The year was 2002. It was 20 years ago. And I had done my externship rotation with Walgreens. Excuse me. And during that rotation, I got to know the pharmacist supervisor. He basically supervised everybody in the district that was a pharmacist. And I wanted to leave St. Luke's because the hours weren't really meshing with my family life. I had just gotten married and I wasn't seeing a lot of my husband. I needed one shift and I had been working 2 firsts and 2/3 in a week and it just wasn't working. I called him up and I said, listen, I'd like to move on. What do you have that's open in Walgreens? And he said, I have a 7 on, 7 off midnight pharmacist position. Are you interested? I said, yes. He never even interviewed me because he knew me for 8 weeks during my externship. I got the job. 2002, fast forward 20 years, it is no longer like that.
No.
It's amazing how things have changed.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing that has never changed is curating information so that you can access it. And I want to move on to talking about binders. I understand from many people that I have talked to that have worked with you that you had some binders that you created as drug information resources for yourself or for your department. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Well, it evolved before we had the ability to electronically retrieve a lot of this information, but our clinical advisors in the department would put out an informational sheet. Let's say it was like methylprednisolone dosing for spinal cord injury type thing. They have a staff meeting, say, this is what the guidelines, this is what we're going to do. When they come into the ER, you need to do this, da, da, da. Well, people would look at it and just toss them. And so I kept mine in, sleeves, and I started these notebooks, and they ended up being like the widest 3-ring binder you could, purchase. And I had it alphabetized, and, if it was calculating pharmacokinetics, doing creatinine clearances, dosing for something like, spinal cord injury or like rabies guidelines, things, case-centered dosing, things that were, you had to pull it out of your head really fast. And so I started these notebooks, and pretty soon it was 3 volumes, and they sat up on the shelf over where all the pharmacists worked, and people were always pulling them out, looking at them. And I just kind of kept everything that I knew that I needed, especially when I worked midnights. You're a one-man show. And I had other hospitals would call us occasionally for help and advice, because we're all kind of, we're all in this brotherhood of pharmacists that our nature is to help others. And so a lot of times I would get calls, and I had that at my fingertips. And it was really, for me, it was really helpful. And as the years went on, a lot of that information was able to be stored in our departmental documents. And I think maybe my idea kind of evolved into something that was available on our database. So those documents were available to research. So if you wanted to look up, rabies dosing, rather than having to go to a drug reference and look it up, you could go to these cheat sheets, we called them, that we had. And that's my cheat sheets, I think, kind of started that. But for many years, those notebooks, those binders were, obviously a lot of people used them. So they got a lot of wear and tear.
I've talked to many a young pharmacist who has worked with you, and they have commented about the binders. I think the most recent one was Fuad E.
Oh, yes.
And he married one of my previous interns. And I said, Fu, I never saw the binders. And he said, oh, there was more than one.
Yeah.
He was impressed.
Well,
and I think he has used them.
Yeah, I think I left them behind. I didn't take them with me, but I had them. Then when I moved on to the OR, I had my own references there that I used as well. And the other ones stayed in the main pharmacy for the rest of the gang. And it was a nice, quick reference. A lot of them, we had departmental guidelines that we had to adhere to. And those departmental guidelines were right there at my fingertips. Whereas if I went out and looked in like Micromedics, it might give me the dosing, but we had guidelines that we followed. So it was our departmental rules that, I had it at my fingertips. So it was helpful.
Excellent points. There's a lot of pharmacists that come right out of pharmacy school and admit that they feel like they don't know everything. And to them, I would say, you're normal. But I think that you have kind of shared today almost like a coping mechanism for that insecurity, that feeling of insecurity. It's okay to not know everything, but once you figure it out, it's a good idea to, I call it curating, like creating a space that you can access easily so that in the future, next time, you're able to have it, like you said, at your fingertips. And then moving on, it's a very individual thing. It's like me, I'm working in cardiology. So not me personally, but I'm saying you towards the end of your career, you could say, hey, I'm working in cardiology. These are specifically the things that I need to access on a regular basis. And this is what I need. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I just feel like it's so good to talk about this because people need to know these hacks that can help them, even in the information age, when you feel like you have everything at your fingertips. It's okay to individualize it so that it serves you in your current role.
Well, and what I found out working nights was they took our computer system down. That's when they would do their updating. So I might be without a computer for half an hour. And you can have all the drug information you want out there on the web, But if you need it right now and your computer is not functioning, you know, it's nice to have your references. And I always say, if you don't know something, you find out how to know, where to find it. And so those things were like the emergent things that we need. A lot of it was the emergent things that we needed to know, and you had to know it fast. And it was right there just in case you didn't have connectivity, so.
Absolutely. And I think it would help train a coworker too. These are like, how on a website there's frequently asked questions. I feel like that binder is the FAQs,
Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I had a lady that came and worked for us, and she was probably in her 50s. She'd worked retail her entire career, and she took a job at the hospital with us, and she was really afraid and scared. And I told her, get a notebook, have it in your hand. When I tell you this is important, you need to write it down. And I ran into her years later, and she was with her husband. They were there for testing. And she said, oh, honey, I want you to meet this pharmacist. She taught me everything I know about hospital pharmacy. And I said, oh, no, not really. She goes, yeah. She goes, you did. She said, when you told me to get a notebook and write it down, and she said, that was the best advice anybody gave me. And I said, don't be afraid to go back and look in that notebook when you come, you get to that and you go, oh, I know she told me that. And I told my techs all the time, do not answer the phone unless you have a pen in your hand. Because in the OR especially, they don't want it tomorrow. They want it 5 minutes ago, and they don't want to repeat themselves. So you got to get it right the first time. So if you don't know what they're saying, get a pharmacist or, write down what you think they said, and we'll go from there. But that was the best advice she said I gave her, was that I said, get a notebook, start writing things down. So teaching old people and teaching new people, young people. So.
No, I think it's even today. I think this is fantastic advice, because the thing is, there's so much that we can pass down as experienced pharmacists to the next generation. They can take it or leave it. But if we tell them what worked for us and they see a purpose for it in their lives, they can use it. And so many pharmacists come out of pharmacy school thinking, I don't know enough. Well, this is how you get to know what you need to know. And you can reassure yourself that it's there and that you know it. And next time you see it, you feel even more confident.
I agree.
Well, thank you again for sharing that story about the binders. That was on my hit list of questions to ask you about today. And I'm so glad we talked about it.
I didn't know they made such an impression on people.
No, I think it's great advice. I'm a binder person. I wasn't at first, but somebody introduced me, not necessarily even for my pharmacy career, but just in my life to, I call it containerize information. And you've got things on each topic. For example, I have a binder on all the legal documents, non-disclosure agreements that I've had to sign, releases for my artwork, for my logo, or for photographs that I've used for my website or online or anything, or voiceover related stuff, contracts and whatnot. And I just feel like binders are a great way to organize information. And I just wish I would have started using one for pharmacy type stuff a little bit sooner. And anyways, I know now. And I think you are helping younger generations right now by sharing it here on the podcast.
Well, I had them for each of my children, I will tell you, a confession here.
Oh, we're talking about mom stuff today. Let's hear it.
I had a 3-ring binder for each kid on the kitchen counter. Immunization information, school stuff, whatever things they were involved in, all the things that I needed to get to right away, soccer schedules, upcoming dance recitals, that type of thing. So each one had a notebook, and that was my go-to for a lot of things, and it was really handy. And I guess that's where it all started, was with the kids with the 3-ring binders.
Hey, whatever works. It's all good for the patients and for the kids.
Well, and there's just so much. I mean, back then it was an address book or a a planner. Everybody had to haul around. They got dog-eared. Now we have our phones. You can put a wealth of information in there. But the binder was the permanent documents that, it was just a quick grab, and I could, get information about upcoming scheduled things and so forth. So it was good.
Well, thanks again for sharing that. I'm just going to hit you with 2 more questions about being a pharmacist, and then we're going to fully move into the mom stuff. How about that?
Okay.
All right. The next question is, what are you doing now as a pharmacist now that you're retired?
Nothing. No, I just gave a talk this morning at Southview High School. We've been asked to do that type of thing. Probably, I guess, the main thing that we have done in our retirement, and this is my husband and I both, has served as pharmacists in the medical mission field. We have done medical missions through Christian Medical and Dental, which is a subgroup of global health outreach. Their primary focus is to spread the good news of the salvation of our Lord. And in doing that, they go to less fortunate areas and provide a medical clinic. We have doctors, nurses, pharmacists. We've had chiropractors, physical therapists, and basically provide a medical clinic and dental clinic and eye clinic where they, do eye exams and provide these people with glasses. And then they come to the pharmacy. And over the years, we've been to Nicaragua several times. We've been to El Salvador, several times. Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, and most recently, I guess that was the Gambia, Africa. And it's interesting. These people are all needy for medical needs as well as spiritual. And so our goals are hopefully met. They're usually a week to 10-day missions. We're out in the mission field. And every step of the way, after they triage them, they determine whether they need medical or dental or both or glasses, but everybody needs pharmacy. So it's very fast paced. It's hard work. Oftentimes we're standing in dirt or a concrete floor in hot temperatures. And it's, we feel that we're doing God's work. It's a beautiful experience. We've had pharmacy students from Cedarville University with us a few times. We've had people that know nothing about pharmacy that learned real fast in a week about filling prescriptions. And I spend a lot of time in preparation for it because it's usually Spanish labels that I create. I've got a full library of directions in Spanish and medication names in Spanish. And then when we went to Africa, it was it's a British colony, so they speak English there, but there are several native tribes. So there's probably 6 or so native tribes that we've always had interpreters with us wherever we've gone, and they help with the translation process. And but the labeling helps in Spanish, so that really helped us, and it takes time off the interpreter having to do that. So that's what we spend a lot of our. We've done them ever since, before we retired, but since we've retired, we continue to do that, and we'll continue to do it as long as the Lord provides good health and the ability to do it. And, COVID has put a whole new kink in that. We just had a team that went to the Gambia, and they all came home negative, which was good. But we had some people that went to Nicaragua last week, and they had a couple of them that contracted COVID. And that was our concern. We almost got stuck in Nicaragua when COVID first broke out. We left just as they were doing the lockdown here in the States. And we got home like that day. So
I remember that.
That's what we do, and we will continue to do it as long as we are physically able. So
Well, what kind of drugs do you dispense while you're there? I think it's fantastic that you serve in that way. I would love to as well, but my life situation doesn't allow it. What's it like for the drugs?
We've got it's a pretty simplified formulary. You've got the typical, pain meds, which is, no more than like ibuprofen, Tylenol. There are no narcotics involved. A lot of antibiotics, antihypertensives. There's very small form. We have a small formulary because the problem is a lot of these people, they live up in remote areas. And if you start treating something like hypertension, 30 days after we leave, you've created a monster. So it's sometimes almost better not to treat. Although even up in the mountains in Nicaragua, there were people that were able to get into like Managua, the capital of their country, to get dialysis and that type of thing. Antibiotics, antihypertensives, antifungals. There's a lot of antifungals, topicals. I would say primarily antibiotics, and there are some for diabetes. We've had a few needs for insulin, but it's a pretty simple formulary. My husband's the one that creates a laminated formulary for each of the docs. So because we're usually in humid temperatures and they can reference it, and this is what we have. This is what you'll get. We have people pre-packaging the first few days we're there. We get people just, bagging them up and to try to make it go fast. But it's interesting everywhere we've gone. It's been a different scenario. One time in Nicaragua, there were a lot of children. It was like a huge community of children having children. So there was tons of kids. We had a lot of oral antibiotics. One place we went, we mixed up a lot of product for lice. They call it Itch Be Gone. It's something I've never seen before, but that type of thing, scabies, a lot of topical situations. They have a lot of respiratory issues in some of these countries because they cook inside their homes in a campfire, basically on the living room floor, which is dirt. And so they're inhaling a lot of smoke. So there's a lot of respiratory issues. So that type of thing.
Very interesting. And how do you communicate with your patients?
Well, after we get their prescription filled, we grab the interpreter and we'll go out and I will tell the interpreter what I want them to say. And then they will tell the patient and we go over the instructions. And if it's like a mom with a whole, family of children, then we make it very clear. This one's for Juan, this one's for Jose, this one's for Felipe, and to get it so they keep it all straight. And we stress that with the interpreters, and they're usually very, very good interpreters that we get. They probably give us the best ones. That are a lot of them are volunteers through the organization, but they give us really good interpreters that can speak English fluently and Spanish. So, and the interpreters we had in Africa knew we had a couple of them that knew the native tongues, and so they were able to go out and speak. But we, side by side with the interpreter, talk to the patient.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to overcome that barrier because communication is such a huge component of patient counseling and what pharmacists do.
Yes, it's huge.
Yes. Well, I could talk to you all day about your mission trips. It's so fascinating. I would love to do one myself someday. But I do want to ask you one more pharmacist question before we switch over to mom stuff. And that question would be, what's next for you as a pharmacist?
I'm a reference for a lot of family members. We're the go-to people. That we get phone calls all times of night and day. But I think our focus is going to be continue to do mission work. That's what we love. And I think that's what we'll continue to do.
So not giving up the license yet, right? Hanging on to that?
Nope. Still maintaining my license.
Very good. I think it was Uncle Tom, who of course is also a pharmacist and has been on the podcast before. He said, it was either he or Uncle Al that said, pharmacists don't retire, they just die. And I don't know if that's true, but a lot of pharmacists never give up that license because they just earned it and they want to use it in however way they want until death parts them with it.
Well, if an opportunity comes up and I'm still able and I'm still licensed, then I can still do that. So I'm keeping my license.
More power to you. More power to you. That's cool. Well, thank you for sharing how you've used your voice as a pharmacist throughout your 40 some years of a career. And let's switch over to family stuff. Can you tell me about your family?
I'm married to my husband, Tom. He's also a pharmacist, retired. And we have 3 adult children that all have children themselves. So we have 7 grandchildren amongst all 3 kids. One lives here locally, and the other 2 children are out of state. That's my family.
Awesome. And I've had the good fortune to grow up pretty close to these cousins because geographically we're pretty close together. It's been kind of cool to just know my cousins. Some people have that distance separation, but I really knew my cousins. I went to parades with them and we all caught candy and ate it together. It was good times.
Good times, indeed.
Yes. Titkemeier reunions and all that good stuff. All right. Well, as far as mom stuff, I know that there's a lot of pharmacist moms that may be listening to this. And you, of course, had your kids, I'm trying to think, in the 80s, right? All 3 of them in the 80s, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of pharmacist moms that don't know when to have their family. Can you tell me a little bit about how you and Uncle Tom decided to start your family and what advice you would give to pharmacist moms today about starting theirs?
Well, we always knew that we wanted to have children. My husband and I dated for 6 years before we married. And it was very seriously discussed that, we intended on having a family. And I think for me, getting established in my career and marriage came after that. I tried to impart that to my children. If you can do things in the right order, life's a lot easier. If you don't, it's just a wrinkle in the road. But if you like easy, just take your steps in the right order. So we got educated first, then we got married, then we had children. And in between there, we started our careers prior to marriage. So I was established in my career and I knew we had a little bit of a nest egg put aside and we knew that the time was right. A lot of it's age. And I was 28 when I had my first child. I'd been working for a few years. So I think it's kind of a personal decision. I think a lot of people today want to postpone having children till they're more established in their careers. I think for women, pharmacy is very generous in that there's opportunities to work part-time and still have a family. And for myself, when I was working full-time, when I went back and told them I didn't intend to come back full-time, it was like, well, job sharing wasn't in the vocabulary. So for me, the timing was right. And if I needed to go down to part-time status, I could still survive financially. My husband was working. So I think you have to just, it's a matter of timing as far as where you're at in your career. And if you think you're financially stable, if you intend to go back to work full-time, it can be done. It's just some gyrations that you have to do to get through every day and every week and every month, but it's not impossible. And I always worked opposite my husband so that someone was always home with our children. And I tell them all the time, you are very blessed that you never had to be with a babysitter. If so, it was a very short period of time. I had a girl that would come after high school, would walk to my house, take over. I'd hop in the car, drive to work, and then my husband was home about an hour later. So they were with a babysitter a very short period of time, and it worked for us. But it's as a deciding when to have children, I guess you have to look at your finances and if it's feasible with childcare and all those things that go with it. So
Yeah, there's no one exact formula for having kids at the right time and in the right way and everything. And I remember, I think, being at my baby shower, and you said, "What are you doing for childcare?" And I was working 7 on, 7 off midnights. And I believe I said something short sighted like, "Oh, I'll just sleep a few hours here and there when the baby sleeps. I'll be fine." I was not fine. I didn't have childcare. I ended up working part time, and I don't think I would have done it any other way once I started doing that, because I ended up with a child with a disability, and you never know what hand you're going to get dealt.
right. And I worked nights, and my husband worked days when they were very little. And I had a neighbor that came over in the morning about, I think about 6:30 in the morning, and she would walk next door and stay and until I got home, which was about 7:45. And I always thought, oh, I hope they're still sleeping. And of course, they had 10 kids next door. So she was like a real morning person, and she's all bubbly, and everybody was up and having breakfast and all wound up by the time I got home. And I didn't have anybody. I tried daycare for a short period of time so that I could sleep, but it didn't work because I had to come home, get them ready, take them to daycare, come back, try to sleep, go back and get them. And it was easier to just stay home. So I had a rule that I followed. I didn't drive anywhere on the days after I'd worked all night. And there was a very strict nap time so that I could get a wink or two. And then, my husband was home reasonably early, and then, I cashed it in after dinner. So, but I didn't do it every day. So that was a blessing. I was just part-time then. So
It's very individual what the needs are. And thank you for sharing how you did it. That's very interesting. It's all this stuff that I'm learning as I'm getting older. I just didn't think to ask when I was younger. And your words of wisdom might help somebody listening.
I hope so.
All right. Well, let's talk about some kind of happy things here. What were some of your favorite things about being a mom, like when your kids were 0 through 18? What are some of your favorite things now? And what are some of your favorite things about being a grandma?
When they were kids, I guess it was really exciting to see the changes, how they grew. And for me, that was really a joy to see each step of the way. Never tried to compare any of them, because I did learn along the way that each child is individual and different capabilities, different qualities. And so I think some people try to compare, and you'll just cause yourself a lot of anxiety if you do. So I guess the joy in it was just seeing them develop and the next step, the next stride. And it was fun. The sports was always, the activities they got into was really fun for us. My husband and I were both involved with coaching and scouts and Girl Scouts and all that type of thing, and Sunday school and vacation Bible school and all those things that you have opportunities to do with your family. And this is how you develop friendships. And I will have to say that most of our friends now are people that we met through our children and the activities that they were in. So it's a good time in your life, the best time in your life.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of hit on networking. It's almost like you're networking with the other parents. And I don't know about you, but that's how I found my carpool gang. I take your kid here and you take my kid there, and you make friends and you just help each other out. And there's nothing like it. It's a necessity, in fact.
Yes, it is, for sanity, if nothing else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can't clone yourself. I can't be in 2 different places at the same time. I got 2 kids. I'm sure it was even worse with 3. 3 kids and different activities.
I do remember telling a guy I worked with that I spent Wednesdays from about 3:00 on in my car. And he was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I have this one has to go here. This one has to go to soccer. Then I got to go pick him up. Then I got to get this one there. They have to drop this one off at ballet, come back, wait in the car, and, snacks, drinks, all the things you need in the car. And I did. I spent probably a solid 4 or 5 hours just hauling kids around and waiting. And that was our life, but it was fun. So,
is there anything else you'd like to add? Maybe favorite parts about having adult kids?
It's fun to see them as adults, because you can never imagine when they're little. I just read a book recently, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, by Jim Burns. He's a Christian writer. Keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out. Now, a lot of the chapters applied to people that have different situations going on right now that I'm past, like failure to launch, the kid that's living in your basement, maybe not getting a job, that type of things, not living up to your social mores, that type of thing. But the last probably half of the book was pretty on the money, spot on about, one was on when do you cut the money off? That was a very good chapter. And then dealing with in-laws, your children marrying their spouses. And that's why I think there's that addendum, keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out. So it's good advice. And I will have to say, as you watch them grow and into adulthood and parenthood, there's a lot that you can say that isn't really necessary to say. So I have a friend that I met in Bible study, and she gave me a bit of advice. And she said, whenever you say anything, is it nice? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And so I try to remember that when I'm talking to my adult children. And then there's another book I read just recently about mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. And that was fascinating information, similar to what's in this adult children book. But pretty much, zip it and be a resource for advice if it's solicited. And you're always there as a support. And so that for me is the joy that I see right now, watching my adult children grow into parents and, coaches and ballet teachers and all that type of thing, to see that we set a good example for them and that they are, I guess it's pleasing to us to see that they're well-adjusted and doing the things that I think as parents we need to do, to help spread our knowledge and our goodness to other children, other people's children, because some kids don't all have that in their homes. And you might be that coach that some kid's going to look up to someday and say, he was a great guy. That might be the only person that said something nice to them that day. So I enjoy seeing that in my children because they're all doing those types of things. And it gives us a lot of joy to see that. So
I'm glad to hear that. You sound fulfilled. And can you share how you feel about being a grandma? I mean, what's your maybe a favorite thing or two about being a grandma?
Oh, it's fun to see, just to see how they, each of them is different. My daughter has 3 girls and a little boy, and it's kind of fun to see how he, the sole boy in the family, copes with 3 sisters. And he's very gentle with them and sweet. And I think that's really important. I'll see him take their hand and kiss it, the baby's hand. And he's very gentle with them. And I like that quality. My 2 grandsons that live here in town are typical boys. They're involved in sports, rough and tumble. It's fun to see. We go to their soccer games. They're playing soccer and baseball. And one of them was just in a play, and we went and visited him to see his play. Our two granddaughters are in a dance recital this weekend, and that's fun because it brings back a lot of memories of us going to ballet recitals. And then we have a new little grandson in Arizona, and it was just a joy to see him and hold him and see them starting to grow as parents. It's a joy. It's just a joy to watch them grow. So, and the parents grow in the process. So,
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing all that. You have different perspectives from me, and I just enjoy hearing about what your favorite things are. That's cool. But now I'm going to go dark. What are some of the challenges you've had in your life? Maybe some challenges you would want pharmacist moms to know about.
um,
Challenges as a parent or a grandparent.
I think juggling everything. You've got. I just remember one of the things I did every night before they went to bed. The kids went to bed. It was, where's your book bag? Where's your coat? Where's your gym shoes? So everything lined up on the floor in the middle of the living room so that in the morning we weren't running around. And because when you're disorganized in the morning and you're leaving, tempers flare, you say things you don't mean. So organization was really big for us. And being organized was probably what saved a lot of, avoiding arguments, let's put it that way, and planning ahead for meals. We packed lunches, all of us, for all the years we worked. We packed lunches because it was economical. We planned meals so that when everybody came home, homework first before any activities. I mean, you have a little downtime, then homework, then you can go to soccer practice or ballet or whatever. But until the homework was done, all bets are off, as far as anything else. So probably the hardest thing was staying organized. And I guess I wasn't real good about bedtimes because I had the ones that sat up and read, but they were in their rooms and, lights out or whatever. But I think that's the hardest thing, is keeping a schedule and having, 5 people adhering to it. So I think we did okay.
Are there any challenges to being a grandparent that you'd like to mention?
I think the hardest thing is being able to spend time with them. They're busy. They've got school. They've got activities. You don't like to get in the way. The ones that live out of town, they're busy. They've got schedules, activities. We enjoy going and visiting and seeing them play baseball and soccer and dancing. Obviously, the one that's farthest away in Arizona will be a challenge, but it looks to me like a pretty fun place to go in the winter. So I could become a snowbird and maybe do some time in Arizona and then maybe go to Florida and visit some family down there. And we like the last minute exciting invites, these invitations that we've gotten. Hey, we're going down to Florida for a week with the kids. Would you like to come? And it's Wednesday. When are you leaving? Oh, Friday. So we just pack a bag, hop in the car, and we drove down to Florida for a week. So I like the excitement of last minute plans. Sometimes the spontaneous things that happen are the best when you don't, labor over planning. That is probably the most fun thing. And spring breaks are kind of fun in this cold weather here. So that was, I could become a snowbird, I think. Live in some of these locations, but I could definitely visit.
Yeah, I aspire to be a snowbird as well. I've got 15 or 20 years before I'm ready for that, but you enjoy that, Aunt Janet.
I had never been to Arizona, but I can see why people move there. Definitely the sun shines every day, all day, and lovely place to visit. Florida as well. It's a little bit more humid. It is more humid in Florida, but yeah, snowbirding sounds good.
We're going to start to wrap this up in the next few minutes, but I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for pharmacist moms on work-life balance?
Well, I will have to say that I didn't have like what you call mom's nights out, that type of thing. Our family pretty much focused on family things. The way my husband and I worked, we only had really one weekend off a month, as like we could go somewhere, because one of us was always working. And now later in my career, there were less weekends that we were working, but for many years, you worked every other weekend. So one of us was always working, and same thing went for holidays. So I think if for us, our focus was family time so we could all be together. Work-life balance, you do need downtime, and you need to have the vision to look ahead to fun things. So even if it's planning one day in a month to go to a circus or a museum, some family time, I think is really important for things to look forward to, because work becomes drudgery if there's no fun time. And for us, our fun time was together with our children, doing things together. So we found family things to do. We went camping Easter break one time at Maumee Bay State Park, and it was spring, so it's not really warm, but we had a blast. And we've got a lot of things in our community that when you live here, you don't do them, but people come and visit and say, oh, would you like to go down to Great Lakes? Would you like to go to the art museum? Well, these are things that you can do like staycations, but you can do it on a weekend or just a family outing. We took full advantage of the YMCA all the years that our children, we still do. All children took swimming lessons. Friday nights we went to the Y, we swam, got a pizza, came home. It was family time. So if you plan some things like that you have things to look forward to, it takes the drudgery out of just, get up, go to work. You start to feel like you're a robot. Whatever it is you need. And you time with your spouse or friends or partners to get out and just have some time without wrangling children. Occasionally, that's a good thing. So
you made an excellent point about having things to look forward to, whether it's family time or just couple time. I think that's important. So anybody listening to this can appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
Aunt Janet, I'm going to ask you a fun question. Do you remember any of your pregnancy cravings?
I didn't really have any. I had gestational diabetes with my first pregnancy of 3. And I just remember I kept saying I wanted a piece of cherry pie just because you couldn't eat sweets. And I wanted cherry pie. But when the time came, my husband asked me, I'll go down and get you a piece of cherry pie. And I said, no, it sounds gross. So I had it in my mind that I wanted that, but I didn't really want it. So I never did. But anyway, it was just a mental thing, I guess. You always want what you right?
Yes, you always want what you can't have. Well said. It's funny. One of my other guests on the podcast during this series said that she always wanted what somebody else was eating. So she was an impulse eater kind of in that way. All right. The next question has to do with money. Kids are expensive to raise. We both know that. And just all the things that you have to buy while you're pregnant, while the kids are little, and then throughout their 18 years of childhood. What are one or two things that you had to buy that surprised you?
A couple things come to mind. The first thing is the school book fairs that, they bring you this flyer and they give it to you like 3 minutes before you're going out the door. We're having a book fair. I need money I checked off these things I'd like, so we had to limit what they could choose. And it was always an expense that they want what for these books, but a lot of books in this house. And so it was just a surprise. I didn't expect that. And then as they got older, I spent an inordinate amount of money on soccer cleats and ballet shoes. because they grow so fast. And with the ballet shoes, they wear out fast because they're made out of paper mache and satin. The point shoes are, and I would buy. I think you got a deal if you bought three pair at a time, maybe. So I would buy 3. And then they come without the ribbons on them. You have to sew them on. So it was a lot of money for something that's not even completely put together. So those 2 things. Yeah.
Interesting. I can see how that would happen, though. Shoes are expensive. But then, yeah, every time a new sport comes or a new season comes into play, you've got to cough up the money for the next season. And it's a new size. Even if it's a half size, they got to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Did you have anything else to add to that before we move on?
Soccer cleats, you want your toe real close to the end of the shoe so you can kick the ball. So you don't buy them with extra space at the end. So they don't last long because if they grow, you need a new pair.
Yeah, this is a good point. I didn't even know that. My kid, well, one of them, the younger one, played soccer, but he wasn't serious enough about it for me to have learned that.
Yeah, they like them snug at the toe. So
interesting. Awesome. Well, this has been fun talking about your pharmacy career and kid stuff and mom stuff. Is there any general advice, very broad question here, any advice you would give current or prospective pharmacist moms?
Enjoy the ride, I guess. It's a wonderful profession for women because you can work part-time, less than part-time. I was able to pick up a lot of shifts when I wanted to work. If I didn't want to work, I could cut back and still make a very good wage. And I just think for women, there's a lot of flexibility, more so now than there ever was with a pharmacy career. And it's rewarding. And it's, you're a public servant. And I just, if you have a servant's heart, it's a good profession. And it meshes well with motherhood. And I always said at work, motherhood really prepares you well for this job because it's like dealing with a bunch of children sometimes in the workplace, but also the pharmacy profession prepares you well for motherhood because everybody needs something. You learn to be able to be a provider and to meet the needs of whatever their request is. So it's a great profession, I think, for women.
I agree. Yes. I like how you said that. Motherhood kind of makes you a better pharmacist, and the pharmacy profession prepares you for motherhood, especially that multitasking piece. Don't you agree?
Well, the constant interruption, because the pharmacy profession I see now on these job descriptions must be able to tolerate interruption. And I know that my job was constant interruption. There's no profession I don't think in the medical field where you're constantly interrupted. A doctor probably wouldn't put up with it, but you are constantly, from all sides being interrupted. And so that's what children do, and you can't say to whoever's interrupting you, say, excuse me, your children, you can do that. But so I think it prepares you well for parenthood.
Excellent observation. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I agree too. Aunt Janet, thank you so much for being on the Pharmacist Voice podcast to share how you've used your voice as a pharmacist and how you use your voice as a mom. You take care.
Thank you very much, Kim.
I'd like to share just a few final thoughts with you. First of all, I am so happy that my Aunt Janet and I could connect and record this podcast interview to share with listeners and pharmacist moms everywhere. Aunt Janet was one of my first pharmacist mom role models. We live about 20 or 30 minutes from one another, and it's pretty cool that I get to run into her and Uncle Tom at College of Pharmacy alumni events, local pharmacy continuing education stuff, and of course, family functions. It's a small world. It's pretty cool. Second, I want to point out just how special and rare it is that someone spends 40 years or more than 40 years with the same employer. Aunt Janet and Uncle Tom both worked at St. V's for more than 40 years. Congratulations to both of you on your long careers. Third and finally, I hope that my Aunt Janet has inspired you to use your voice. She pivoted her role during her long career. As you heard, she was a hospital pharmacist, and if you are a hospital pharmacist or a pharmacist somewhere and you want to do something else, I want you to feel inspired to pivot your role in your workplace too. People want to be what they can see. If my Aunt Janet could do it, maybe you could too. Be inspired to try. And when you find something and you feel passionate about it, like mission work, pursue it. Let me wrap this up by saying thank you for listening to episode 152 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes today, you will find a link to Janet Titkemeier's LinkedIn profile, the University of Toledo, St. V's, Christian Medical and Dental, a subgroup of global health outreach, the book Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut and Your Welcome Mat Out by Jim Burns, PhD, and more. Lots of links today. If you know someone who would like this episode or needs to hear it, please share it with them. And subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Join me next week for part 1 of my Pharmacist Dad series. That's right, it's the dad's turn. The first part in the series is an interview with Dr. Tim Ulbrich. I'll talk to you next week.